you want to introduce yourself, Jane? Tell us a little bit about your name, what your background is.
Okay, Jane McLelland. I am a physiotherapist, and in 1994 I was diagnosed with cervical cancer. In 1999 it had spread to my lungs, which is stage 4. The statistics for survival for that are very, very poor. Cervical cancer is very curable in its early stages, but once it starts to spread, the stats are very poor. So when you get to stage 4, it's about a median survival of about 12 weeks. And over 5 years, your chance is about 3 to 5%, and over 10 years, it's 0. So, I mean, very poor stats. So 100% fatal. And where am I now? I mean,
so this was in 1994?
1990, well, that was my initial diagnosis, and then 99 was my secondary in the lungs.
Oh, God. Mm. And so what's well, hang on, where are we? We're 2016, so something's going very well.
Something's going very well. And I can tell you categorically that diet is critical, absolutely critical.
Diet's been critical for you?
Yes. It's all about starving the cancer. That underpinned absolutely everything I did.
Right.
Really critical, but I didn't just do it with diet. I mean, I did almost a sort of a ketogenic, but that didn't exist back in 1999. You know, I just didn't know about anything like that. But what I did know was that glucose and IGF-1 were very linked. I mean, I hadn't got any research.
What's IGF-1? I don't know what that is.
Insulin growth factor, insulin-like growth factor, but it's very linked to glucose. So. Right. To say that glucose doesn't stimulate it, I mean, IGF-1 is actually stimulated by quite a few things, growth factor and lots of other things, but certainly insulin is critical to cut down. So what I knew from my medical training was that you needed to shut off this supply of glucose, and in 1999 I found a supplement called berberine, and it's very similar to metformin. And it actually works on more pathways than metformin. Metformin works on the mTOR pathway, but this actually works on more. And it stops the cancer actually absorbing and using the glucose. So that was critical for me. And then, unfortunately, it wasn't. I mean, I didn't have Facebook. I didn't have any of these things to look at. No websites to really glean all the information. So I was looking at PubMed, Medline, getting all my information from there. So I stuck, because I'm medically trained, I mean, I was looking very much at the science.
Because science is important to you, isn't it?
Critical.
If you've got a science-based background, evidence would be
absolutely
crucial.
And I tracked what I was doing with my marker levels, because you could, you know, with a lot of these anecdotes, you get lots of people saying they've survived, but you can't actually see scientifically what they've done. But I tracked my marker levels when I was going through the whole thing, so much so that my oncologist got completely fed up with me and just wrote me a whole sheath of blood forms to just go and have them done whenever I wanted. I mean, it's scary having it done, because you just don't know what it's actually going to show. But I discovered some off-label drugs going through my research, and actually back then it was easier to get these prescribed.
Off-label drugs?
Off-label. These are drugs that are not normally used for cancer. So they're called off-label because they're not prescribed for cancer. They are actually prescribed for other conditions.
Right.
So metformin, for example, is for diabetics. Statins are for people with high cholesterol.
Right.
And I also use another one called dipridamole, which nobody knows about. There's quite a lot of evidence coming through on the metformin and the statins.
Has this stuff been trialled clinically, or is it?
Interestingly, last year I discovered a clinic that is actually doing almost what I did, and they are getting some great results. So I am super, super pleased about that.
Right.
And I've actually now got, because of that, and because of this burgeoning new evidence on all these old drugs, because they didn't just work on the condition that they were designed for, they also had these secondary effects. And these secondary effects were to help prevent cancer, or to actually stop cancer's metabolism. And it's all about the metabolism, and it's not about the genetics. It's about how it works and metabolizes the glucose and the fat and the protein. You know, all these things are critical to try and stop and to starve cancer, because that really has to be the number one thing that you have to do. Everything else, the immune system, the growth factors, all of that can come on on top of that. But my view, from my experience, my experience is that you really have to cut out the sugar.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, I've got a question from Natasha. Could patients try and get drugs that aren't licensed for cancer treatment online? This could be dangerous in uneducated hands. And where does this also sit within the Cancer Act as well? This is sort of, it's potentially quite controversial sort of.
It is. I got involved with the off-patent drug. There was a bill trying to go through Parliament, and then there was the medical innovation bill. And it just means that doctors are more able to prescribe these things, but they're still very reluctant because there's a lot of their hands are tied by protocols and all these things that are handed down by NICE, and they just feel that they can't actually step outside of the box and do something totally different. They have to stick with these formulaic regimes.
Okay, we'll leave it there with you for the moment, Jane. We'll come to you, Johan. But before we do, just on something that Jane was saying, one of the other voices that you hear quite a lot within the conventional medical system is that the Cancer Act is something. So you hear this a lot. The Cancer Act is in place that prevents anyone from advertising or saying that a drug that isn't approved by the system can treat cancer. It prevents that, and people can be prosecuted. And in what Jane's talking about, it's seen as something that can be a hindrance to certain things, but at the same time, another school of thought I've heard quite a bit is that it's something that protects people from certain drugs that don't work and being led down a garden path towards things that don't work. So there's two different schools of thought around this, and it's a very interesting part of the discussion of this film. Thank you, Jane.